Some are saying a court decision could unravel Obamacare. The D.C. Court of Appeals ruling today that many of Obamacare's subsidies are illegal. These subsidies are vital to the success of the law, but also help to keep consumer costs, that is, down. But a separate court ruling upheld the subsidies entirely. We're covering your health care tonight with Dr. Sreedhar Potarazu, CEO of Vital Spring Technologies. Two courts, two different rulings, 180 degrees apart from each other. Do you think that this first ruling that we talked about, which says the subsidies can't be levied, is this the one that will predominate, and could it put a stake in the heart of Obamacare?
I think it has a real potential, Jerry, of putting the stake in terms of Obamacare and potentially creating a debt spiral. And here's why. Because the economic consequences of what the subsidy actually means and the definition within the law is so vague that it's really open for interpretation, and the IRS is the one that is making the decision in terms of who is eligible for the subsidies. Now,
so wait a minute. So what's the takeaway there? Why is this such a death knell for the law?
Because if you pull out the subsidies, you're going to have about 11 million people participating by 2016 in the federal exchanges. And of those, you're going to have about 7 million people who would technically qualify for subsidies. If you pull out those subsidies, what happens is you all of a sudden increase the number of people who will become uninsured. And if they become uninsured, you then take out the safety gap of the mandate, which means that insurance companies who are counting on the mandate to compel people to buy insurance all of a sudden becomes defunct. And insurance companies are going to be, screaming bloody murder to say, enough already, we can't take on the risk of pre-existing conditions if the mandate falls apart. So it's a domino effect.
So what you're saying is that without subsidies, the system can't operate because you won't have enough people getting coverage, and the mandate falls apart. And yet we've had guests on this show saying that this lawsuit isn't really going to matter, no matter how it's decided, because the administration has already said they're not going to comply and they're going to look for workarounds, and that ultimately it may not mean that much. I mean, look, we've been down this road many times, people opposing Obamacare. Nothing seems to work to blow the bill or the law out of the water. Is there any reason to expect this will work too?
There is reason to believe that the economic rationale behind today's ruling is not going to go away, and they may try to create workarounds, but the fact of the matter remains that the way the law is written clearly stipulates that those subsidies are not applicable to the federal exchanges. And so if it goes to the Supreme Court, the Obama administration cannot refute the fact of what the law reads. And if the Supreme Court ultimately has to rule on this, it's going to come down to what they intended to do. And the intention from the get-go was that more states would be implementing these exchanges, but that didn't happen. So the unintended consequences are that the government is now left holding the pot in over 35 some states of now running these marketplaces, which is far higher than what they intended to do, and it might be more. And this wasn't the intent when they wrote the law.
I have to tell you, it was always my assumption that at the end of the day, that the taxpayer was going to foot the bill for all of this, which was sort of the basis for my objections to the law that is coming out of our pockets. Dr. Potarazu, thanks for coming on the show tonight. Very good to see you.